again, I'm totally making up an example, but I'm pulling through a thread, which is you asked like, how do people move? Where do they get stuck and what can they be doing or what's common? I think that's
Yep.
it. I get stuck of what's next because I have like sort of unintentionally maybe a narrow view of what's possible. How do I start to open up the aperture on what it can be? And it's starting with who you are. Pull
Yes.
those layers back and start to think about how you use who you are to fuel where you can be. And then let's bring back networking, start to talk to people about it.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion. My words got power, my thoughts have action. Motivation, stay gracious. That's greatness. Be audacious. Motivation. Be audacious. Innovation. Be audacious. Inspiration. Be bold. Motivation. Be audacious.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast. It's always a pleasure to be here with you, and I generally mean that because I know your time matters. Thank you so much for choosing to spend a few minutes of your day right here with us. It is greatly appreciated. This podcast exists for one reason. It's to help you live your best audacious life ever. Not a louder life, not a busier life, but a more intentional, curious, and courageous one. Now, I want you to think of your career and your life like a living intersection, busy intersection. Cars are constantly moving through it. You know, some might slow down, some might speed up, but it's lots of movement, lots of activity. Some might even unexpectedly turn, while some pause, unsure which way to go next. You know, curiosity is the traffic light. It doesn't force movement, but it creates clarity. And it's in today's episode we'll be talking about curiosity and how it helps us navigate new skills and emerging opportunities, human connection in a tech-driven world, networking as learning, not extracting, AI as a tool, not a threat, and how discovering where your passions and skills intersect can open doors you never saw coming. My guest today is Carlee Wolfe. Carlee is a leadership development and organizational effectiveness leader with deep experience in career development, mentoring, and the future of work. She also brings a powerful human lens to her work in adaptive sports, mentoring athletes, and community building. Carlee's mission is simple and powerful. It's to help people stay curious, adaptable, and human while navigating change. You know, she is the perfect voice for this conversation because she lives at the intersection of leadership and learning, human connection and technology, career growth and personal purpose. And she doesn't just talk about the future of work, she helps people prepare for it. So whether you're early in your career, mid-journey, pivoting, or wondering what's next, this conversation is definitely for you. So let's get into it. Hey, Carlee, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you for taking the time to be here. So thank you.
Yeah, good morning. I appreciate being here. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's great to be able to engage in dialogues, and I oftentimes will kind of equate these to conversations where, you know, our listeners have an opportunity to kind of eavesdrop on what we're talking about here, and they can take something from from, you know, our discussion and institute in their lives, and perhaps, you know, get themselves to a better place, if you will. And so,
Yeah,
it's nice to kind of be a part of these types of conversations. Again, thank you for for being here.
agreed,
Um,
agreed.
One of the premises of this podcast is really that, you know, life is an ongoing journey, right? And we get on this path, and the path I'm on is destined for me, as Carlee, yours is destined for you. And, you know, each of those paths have their own set of challenges, obstacles, pitfalls, but also rewards too, right? And so it's
Yeah.
about embracing everything, you know, on that journey. You have a background, well, certainly in the career in the world of work, and you're encouraging networking, and you encourage, I guess, a new approach, if you will, to how we look at our careers and life, and so on and so forth. So maybe as a starting point, I could ask you to introduce yourself to our audience, talk about the work you do, and what's got you to the point that you're at now.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Life is just kind of this like ever changing, every moving space. So appreciate being able to have a conversation with you. It's always good to step back and reflect. So I currently work at Hyatt Hotels. I lead our leadership development and org effectiveness group. Been there for about rounding out about 5 years here.
Hmm.
Really appreciate being in the industry. It's been fun to kind of just learn how hotels are structured, but we talk about life and people and moving. Hospitality is it's a big career
Sure.
place for folks, and you get
Sure.
to meet people on their journeys all the time. Why are you traveling? Where are you going in? Where are you coming in from? Where are you going to, etc. So that's my day job. I also coach volleyball on the side. It's been something I've been very passionate about for about 15 years. Since the pandemic, I've solely focused on adaptive sports. And so that shows up in two ways. One is here in Baltimore, I support an organization called Kennedy Krieger Institute,
Okay.
and they have an adaptive sports program for kids. So get to work wheelchair basketball, pickleball, um, swimming. Name the sport. It's there for the kids to be able to participate. And I also do some work with USA Volleyball. So their pipeline program where they are
Wow.
recruiting
Okay.
athletes to start the game, or maybe they're later in their career and they're working towards that big step, which is to work towards that national team. Which, for those who don't know the pipeline that well, that eventually leads to things like the Paralympics.
Exactly.
So it's a little bit, and as you said, I'm very passionate about careers, so always happy to have that conversation with folks too, especially now today with the markets and
Sure.
things going on in the world. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Live in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm very passionate about the city.
Love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you for that introduction and a little bit about
Yeah.
yourself. And one of the things that you mentioned, you touched on is sort of navigating, the future of work, right? And that's whether that's a catchphrase, it's real, it's hype. I mean, it's gonna be, it is what it is. But I'm really curious is when we talk about careers and the future of work, what should listeners actually start to do today, like in terms of their careers and if they really want to be serious about it moving forward?
Yeah. I mean, and to your point, like what's it called these days? I think it could be all of that. I think it could be a catchphrase. I think it could also be very serious in terms of like just making sure we're thinking about it.
Hmm.
So on that front, I think two things. One is how do we, like all this conversation about like AI, machine work down the road, although we're seeing that in some places. That's all about kind of like taking work out of the system in one way, right?
Okay.
Like simplifying, adding efficiency, and there's a lot of excitement around that, but there's also a lot of concern around that, right? Like thinking about what's changing for our jobs, what's changing for our careers. And so one thing I would encourage people to think about is also being a part of that conversation of how we keep things human, how we keep things innovative that is like, by the way, driven by humans. How can we lean into those aspects of the transformation? And I think that question mark sits in everyone's jobs and positions.
Right.
So how do you kind of like take that reflective step back? But also for those who are literally leading like teams and are part of organizations where you interact with people every single day, how do you still like lean on that humanness? Because that's what's gonna continue to make places special to work. It's what gonna
Hmm.
continue to keep us connected as a like humanity sort of way. So that's one thing I would encourage people to think about, and we can, dig in.
Sure.
The other thing is also just in the shift, right? Jobs, positions, career tracks, industries, like those are all going to change. So
Yes.
also, how do you think about skill advancement? Like, what are the new things that you can be learning? So even just simply starting to get in the conversation about AI, be curious about it, start to poke around, right? There's so many and I always give the caveat of like check where your data is going, but there are a lot of like free apps and opportunities to get into this space. And so
Yep.
this is one of those things where it's not about tech, right? This is about tech where we're like sitting there and advancing over like years and months where we have this huge ramp up time. The world's moving and super,
Right.
super fast. And so I'm passionate and encourage people to get on board because then that's where we start to also get disparity in where people can be accessible then in the future of their jobs and career opportunities. So those would be like two big things to definitely think, and they're big ones, but
Yeah, no, as actually, I was gonna say, they are definitely two big ones, and
yeah,
I mean the humanity piece, that's gonna be with us from now to the end of time because that's part of our core existence as humans, right? Be able to connect on that level. But I want to go to touch around your point on AI because you certainly suggest a lot of really key points. Adaptability is what I'm hearing, flexibility,
Yeah.
being, not necessarily ahead of the curve, but trying to keep up with the curve, so to speak.
Yeah. Be
Um,
curious.
yeah, curiosity is a big one. I mean, even now when you have that conversation about AI, I'm still a little bit surprised at the number of people say, nah, I've got no interest in that kind of a thing, or I don't want to know
Yeah.
about that. And it's a little surprising because it's well, the potential of it, for one, if used appropriately, but then second, the other part is the journey of technology and growth and development, all these things. So yeah, that's kind of two things that stand out to me on that.
Yeah, and I think maybe in the past, and I think I mean I'll admit to this, right? I don't get on every like tech craze or app craze, if you will. Um, and I think in some ways those are choices we have and can engage with, right? Because it's maybe where we want to go. Like think about social media. Like I don't want to get into TikTok. Am I missing some conversations? Maybe am I not on the social trend? Sure. Is it maybe doing day-to-day disadvantage for me at work? I don't know. I don't think so, at least in my space, and probably a lot of people's spaces. But in terms of AI, well, first of all, it's here. It's already embedded in things that we do, so it's already in spaces that people may or may not realize. But I also think if you're anywhere in your career path, right, if you have any sense of years left, right, before the you get off the fun Ferris wheel into retirement, um, it's going to be there, right? It's going to change our jobs, and in many ways it has. And you're also seeing companies talk about where they're preemptively creating change in the organization for what's to come. And so
Right.
I'll go back to that word curiosity, because I also think maybe it could be scary, like, oh, is it a trend? Do I need to get on board? Where do I even begin? So even just being AI curious, like where can I start to poke around at? How can this maybe help me in my personal life? Like even just expanding how you do search. I mean, that's like bottom, like, early entry. But I think just starting there and then starting to ask more questions, like how else can I use this? How else are other people using it? Or if it's just about work, what's happening in my job and where can I maybe get a little bit smarter or curious about how I can engage differently with the tasks and activities that I have. So yeah, be curious because it's here, it'll be here, and it's going to be a monumental shift.
I'm a big fan of the word curiosity, because of the potential that it leads to, right? Like if you ask that question, why or how come or explain or let me understand this better, it can take you down a path that you never expected to go down,
Yeah.
and the possibilities that it opens up are endless. So I'm certainly a big fan of curiosity. I think though a piece that, and love to get your thoughts on this, but I think that's it's key in this as we talk about how we navigate this world of work and where we go, and and us being agile and flexible and all these sorts of things is having purpose to what we do and knowing, again, why we're doing what we do, and being purposeful about the work. I wonder if you can
Yeah.
sort of talk about that dynamic because I think that's another key aspect in all of this that we're talking about thus far.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about kind of like the intersection of like curiosity and where that like sits in our like
Hmm.
world of work. I mean, I think that's it's starting with like possibilities, right? It's like kind of exploring like what where we're even at, like where we're even at today. Like, how did I arrive here? What's like happening around me? What's that person doing over there? Where's my work going? And I think it's I always love to think about like intersections, like what are the things that I'm passionate about? Like where are the things that I like have skill set on? Where do I see myself shining? What do other people say I'm good at? What do I maybe see is happening in the future? And start to like kind of intersect those moments. So for example, if I'm really good at pulling data reports and like creating insights for folks. And
Hmm.
I'm super passionate about healthcare. How can those two things marry into a place that this is the curious part, right? I have this and I have that. Maybe I've never seen them together, but how does that play into a space that might open up opportunity? Or even just, hey, I was at my kid's softball game the other day, and I'm like noticing like they're sitting down in their huddles, and I asked afterwards like what they were talking about,
Hmm.
and my kid said, "Oh, we're kind of like analyzing like where we've been successful at like hitting into left field." I was thinking to myself, "Oh, I could like really maybe collect some data for the team over the season and actually
Ah,
provide that back to my kid and say like,
right.
hey, here's where you're really shining. And I'm just giving that as a personal example because
Yep.
I
Yep.
think curiosity exists. You asked me about careers, but well, first of all, that can turn
Yes.
into a career, but I think that that just speaks to the curiosity of like where things can pop up. Because what if it starts at my kid's game, but then starts to build into something bigger? Like,
Of
oh, maybe
course.
actually I want to get into sports. Like, this is kind of cool. So I'm just pulling on a few components of like what
Hmm.
curiosity means, but I think you said it best, like remaining open, and I would put that on with like asking questions, be observant, being open, and letting that journey also like unfold where it does, right? You and I started this conversation with like, oh, we're always moving in life, it's ongoing. That is curiosity. That is
Yes.
always like waking up the next day and being like, what's going on today? How are you waking up in your job and being like, what's going on today and what could be possible tomorrow?
Yeah, yeah. Even that example that you gave with the baseball, example, um, yes, it applies to that specific thing, but the piece around it that I think is really significant is that there's a skill that's being built there. So now you've
That's
mastered the skill of analyzing which direction the ball goes, and you can take a step further and say, when is that, or who does it, or all the different circumstances around that specific space. Now you're building your analytical skills, and working. So if you bring it back to the world of work, skills
yeah.
based workplaces are key, and being able to identify those skills, so identify the existing skills that you have and how they translate into the workplace. And so I think that's a really healthy exercise that more individuals should think about looking at doing.
I agree. In here, I'm going to add on one more layer because you asked about AI and we were
Hmm.
talking about how do people get started. So let's pull this all the way through.
Sure.
My kid's game. I'm like collecting this data. I'm building these skills. That's something I do in my work. Let's go the next step. Let's even just get on again. Start. Go to Google. Be like, I have stats for my kid's game. How can I use AI to enhance the insights or the conversation that I'm having about what I learned today? And chances are either A, that specific actual AI engine will be able, the generative AI will be able to like get there, or it
Hmm.
might suggest some apps that you can pull, or it might even go a step further for those who are very, very curious, be like, hey, why don't you think about actually building this out? Here's sort of like the steps in which you could do that and build that right into your phone. So this is
Mm.
how we start to get curious. This is how then back to our AI conversation, we start to
Yep.
get pull through AI curiosity and we start to expose ourselves in different ways. So and then to your point on skill sets, we're building that AI skill set. We're like
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
we're exploring something that's different that can also apply in our jobs. So it
Well,
all intersects, right?
it
It's just
does.
like,
And the interesting conversation about AI is we sort of talk about, well, it does this for us, it does that for us, like all these things that it does, and because of those things, it's bad. And I sort of take it back and go, I remember when they introduced a calculator, right? And kids had
yeah,
calculators at school, and I thought it was a big deal because you won't know how to do math anymore, right? But it's recognizing that it's a tool, and it's a tool that we can use to advance. I
yes,
mean, if you go further back, once upon a time, we didn't have cars. We were drawn around by horse and buggies, right? And the cars were introduced, and it goes, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to the horse? And it's going to change our landscape, and people going to lose jobs. There was a guy that used to go around that cleaned up horse manure, right? Because we had horses all over the place, and that guy's now out of a job. What's going to happen? Like it's silly. I know I'm making light of it a little bit, but when you look at sort of the advancement, it really says that society does advance, technology does come into play, and it does help us, and we adapt to it.
yeah. Well, and I mean, in the case of we're talking about like think about also like the fun possibilities, right? Like this like personal example of like maybe I can connect my with my kid in a different way because I've got this
Yeah.
sort of like interesting note about their game. So I also think about be curious about the possibilities of like what could be fun versus like fun or impactful versus the takeaway to your point, which I think is what you're talking about. Like these things
Hmm.
are going away, be afraid of that. How do we kind of flip it flip
That's
it on
right.
its head?
Hmm.
I
Networking
hope
is just
somebody's listening, by the way, that like has a kid in baseball or like softball or can like hopefully at least following on the metaphor.
but let's take it a step further. It doesn't just have to be baseball. It could be
Totally,
right, like, and
totally.
that's what I'm saying. That's where I'm saying, like, it opens up this possibility and expands our frame of thinking. When you talk about skills, and going back to the skills conversation again, it's a
Yeah.
new set of skills. So
Yes.
as much as we talk about all the things AI can do, AI is only as good as the information or the prompts that we feed into it. So now the skill that we need to learn is being able to be very clear in our language and how we make such creator prompts, and be very decisive in what we're asking it to do. Because AI can give you what it asks for, but it may not give you what you want. And there's a clear
Yeah.
distinction between the two. And so that's a skill development right there.
For sure. On the generative space, that's 100% true. And also, like, what it gives us is that totally accurate and true, right? All those sorts of things. So I think there's that component. I also think to expand, like you're talking about that generative piece, how to expand beyond that, there's also a ton of apps out there that also, it's like literally, how do I get started started with AI? In fact, I get those targeted at me. I think they're like trying to like poke at me, like, hey, you're getting a little old out there. Have you thought about like not being old and like staying with the times? I'm like, hey, I got it. But I say that just to mainly one, we're all there, but also and like trying to figure it out, but also that there are resources out there to make it super simple.
Mhm.
Whether it's to your point, like how do I like ask the right things to generate the right content, to what's like a program, or how do I want to build a website, I can actually do that by myself. I don't need to pay a programmer for that. Like
Right.
that's like the power of also these tools. And it's just about like kind of opening up our purview on that. So for those, I'll just like put that in there for those looking to get started. Like that's the we'll just use the Google.
Yep.
That's the Google search. Hey, I want to get started with AI. What learning programs are out there for me to get started? And it's not just even traditional, right? You and I are chatting on podcasts. This is a way to connect. But these programs are also like, hey, I'm going to take you step by step on how to do something. Or I'm going to actually get you into the resource and do it with you.
Yes.
By the way,
Yeah.
I'm now going to provide AI coaching too. It's not just about sitting in this class. Like, let's talk about where you're learning and where you have more opportunities. Like, this is
Yes.
what's
Yeah.
I think cool about it, but also where people can start.
And again, being open, it goes right back to that. You've got to be open
Yeah,
to make this help to make all this work.
yeah,
On the thought of being open, something else that you all reference is networking, or you talk about networking a lot. Kind of
yeah.
going outside sort of the traditional means that we're familiar. I wonder if you sort of expand that further, and then also too. You got a lot of introverts out there, people that want to stay in their little shell, and the idea of
Yeah,
network
yeah.
scares them. Well, how do we encourage them to break out of that mold?
Yeah, I think okay, so when you talk about non-traditional networking, for me it's like we'll keep on this like curiosity thing. Like what are you looking to learn? Where do you maybe want to explore? Like let's just use those words because to your point, even like introvert, maybe connection is the part where we're like we'll kind of like hone in on or work on in a second. But in terms of creativity, I think it's so many people are open to connecting, sharing their story, sharing their insights. And I think at the core of it, that's what networking is. But let's go back to something I said earlier about intersectionality. What is it that you're looking to learn? Where can you go find that? Right? You can always go do research. I think when we talk about, right, find an article, find a podcast, find a book. When we talk about networking, I think that's like pulling the story off the page. One, right,
Mhm.
gaining more insight. But I think then it's about the expansive network that then you're creating beyond that, right? In this networking moment, we are creating a connection, something that we are both exchanging that we can
Mhm.
both benefit from, even if it's just the story, even if it's
Right.
just that human connection. But back to like, but then what, where does that go beyond? Well, maybe this person has an idea that I've never thought about, or is thinking about something that I'm now curious about. Well, and then we are both curious about it. All right. Now we go back and we each network. So we start to create this web. And I'm sharing this because I think that starts to diversify the experience and exposures that we have. I think it opens up even more possibilities. I think it enriches the learnings that we're then gaining from whatever it is that we're seeking to learn. So those are all reasons why we would want to network, or why I would say is maybe like a different way to think about it. I think sometimes people, when you hear networking, you're like, I have a thing I need to go get. Someone will provide that for me. I
Right.
would break that actually and just say, like, what is it that we can engage together on? Because I think it's enriching for both. Now, introvert folks, how do I go about doing this? I think it's about taking baby steps. Like, who are maybe folks that you do spend your time and energy with, or
Mhm.
maybe the places in which you go do that at, and tapping into those spaces. Like, I'll give an example. Like, I actually just spoke with a friend who's, they're looking for a new job. They're very introverted. They're like, I don't even know where to go to get networking. I don't like meeting new people. It's extremely overwhelming for me. This
Right.
person has been in academics their whole life. My first question to them was, Well, where, you're very passionate about what you do in your space. What about the professors that you haven't chatted with in a while? Like, even just catching up with them, like, would you be curious to learn where they're at today? They're like, yeah, I guess I could do that. I'll give them a call. That sounds good. That's networking. And that's something, and that's also maybe I understand it's still like I still have to reach out, and maybe they say
Right.
no, or maybe they're busy and I still have to have that conversation. But that point of entry is much different than like I'm looking for Sally Sue or Joe Bob or whoever out of the blue on my LinkedIn page. So I think the question is, how do you lower or where is the fear in that introversion, and
Hmm.
how do you like take a step in? And that's why I use that example for my friend. By the way, very proud of him for making those reach outs. But here's, let me
Great,
tell
great.
you, in that coming back and then hearing
Yeah.
his story, he was
Yes.
so happy he did that reach out. He's like, I haven't caught up with that professor in 10 years. It was so good to hear from him. He's doing A, B, and C research. We're going to now talk about this other research project that we're
Yep.
doing. It was such an enriching experience. And so it was worth it. It was worth it. But I think that's the question. Where can I begin in the space in which maybe I'm already
Yep.
comfortable with, to then create, right, that larger network?
As you're talking, the theme of I think the curiosity word is going to come up again because I think
Always.
there's some real benefits around um, even networking without purpose, right? So I'm not
Yeah.
networking because I'm trying to get something. I'm networking because I'm curious about something, and
Yes.
through that process, you've now opened up your insights a little bit more, opened up your understanding. You've gained some information, some knowledge. Now we don't know where that knowledge will come to aid you down the road. We
Yes.
don't know where you could perhaps share that with someone else. We don't know that. We're acquiring it just for the sake of being curious. And so I
Yeah.
guess I guess the idea that I'm thinking as you're talking, the idea comes to mind is why not just network for the sake of networking? And maybe change it. Don't call it networking. Maybe there's some stigmas around that people
Yeah.
who struggle with. Maybe it's just like connecting with people and see where it goes.
Yeah. Maybe it's just learning. Maybe I'm just looking to learn. Looking to gain perspective. I'm looking
Hmm.
to um broaden my view on something. I'm For those extroverts, I'm looking to fill the cup. I think all of us could be. I love like the flip on its head, because I'm with you. I think if we go out with I have a need, I think that's where it is tough, and I think the other people can feel that, like, oh, this person's just here for an exchange, or like
Right.
something that I have for them, versus
Hmm.
it's a shared, maybe another word would be community building. It's a
Right,
shared
right.
community. We're like adding value into each other's community space.
Right, because when you do network for the sake of gaining something, there is a risk that it comes across as inauthentic. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
right? It's like, I can remember going to network events, and people are just passing out business cards. They have no idea who I am. They're, here's my card, and they're throwing cards out, and that does come across as a bit like, what are you doing, collecting cards or getting, like, what is this
Yeah.
about
Who
for
are
you?
you? What are you even
Yeah,
doing?
that's right. As he's running away, I'm like, oh, you're so and so, and he's gone, right? Because he's off to
Yeah.
give the next person the next card. But yeah, so you do have to be mindful that you could, come across as being inauthentic if you're not careful.
Yeah. Inauthentic, and then what's to gain? It feels like it's a one way conversation. It's not an exchange. I think
Yeah,
that's the difference right there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You also do mentoring and some coaching, right? Like that's part of the work you do in helping. Is it now? Is just in careers or beyond that? Like I wasn't clear. I wanted to clarify that.
I think it's like two spaces. One, happy to, yeah, mentoring with like careers. I just gave that example about my friend who's looking, and in this case, first step was about networking, because he's in a very crowded space. I think the other pieces of mentoring in terms of, I mentioned like sports and coaching. I think there's like a life coaching and also mentoring that always comes with athletic coaching, right? Because it's not just about what's happening on the court. We bring our whole selves just as we do in all aspects of our lives. And we ask questions like, what's next in life? Hey, I'm going to college. What does that look like for me? I'm thinking about retiring from the sport. What does that look like? So that's also where mentoring exists for me.
And so, given that you're in those different types of spaces, or do you see any commonalities between the two, whether it be in sports or in our professional lives? Are there any commonalities that are perhaps stagnating people or holding them back?
I mean, I think it's some of the themes that we've been talking about. I think one is we are moving about our lives, and we build, and the older we get, the more sort of entrenched these can start to feel, right? We build our paths. Like I'm an athlete and I've been an athlete my whole career. What do I do next, right? I'm sort of like frozen in that next step. Or I've always been in finance. I've been doing these things, like I'm looking for another job. Where do I go? So I think a common theme is like what's possible, and how do I broaden my trajectory of what's possible. I think it's hard. I think we have like so many options in our lives.
Yeah.
Like there's a privilege to having options, and the other side of that is that it can be stressful, it can be overwhelming, it can be paralyzing. And so I think that that's like a very common theme. And so that's where I go back to of like what is possible? Like how am I leaning on maybe things that I know, skill sets that I've built? And let's
Hmm.
use sports because somebody might be this is like I think a tough one for people to pivot from because they're like, "Oh, I've been on the court for 20 years." Like where how do I show up at the front door of like a corporate office as an example? Like that feels like a huge shift. And maybe in some ways it actually is. Or not actually, it is. Like there are a lot of ways that it's very, very different, like the culture, the interactions, etc. But from a job, and how do I think about that? It's how do we strip it down to its core? I
Yeah.
have skills and experience that I've acquired. So let's just go to sports, right? I'm a great team player. I probably have great leadership attributes. Maybe I did keep teams. I don't know why stats is big on the topic this morning. I kept team
Yeah. Yeah.
stats. So I have analytical skills. By the way, maybe I have actually started to gain exposure because I'm very passionate with logistics. And so I worked a lot with our team travel group.
Hmm.
I've built those skills. How do I start to use those with what I'm passionate about? Like, okay, here's some industries that I found that were interesting. Like, I'd love to get into environmental care. I'd love to like get maybe explore tech. That sounds interesting to me. Um, and by the way, in the world, I'd
Hmm.
love to build like a more sustainable community where people can like connect more often. I'm making stuff
Right.
up.
Yep.
How do
Yep.
we use those three attributes? Skills. Okay, now I have some skills. Let's go with the data piece. I'm passionate about the environment. I want to build better community. How do I marry those things together and start to
Yes.
think about a job? Well, maybe I want to go work an environmental agency that's targeting urban spaces, and they need a data person. Again, I'm totally making up an example, but I'm pulling through a thread, which is you ask like, how do people move? Where do they get stuck, and what can they be doing, or what's common? I think
Yep.
that's it. I get stuck
Mhm.
of what's next because I have like sort of unintentionally maybe a narrow view of what's possible. How do I start to open up the aperture on what it can be? And it's starting with who you are. Pull
Yes.
those layers back
Mhm.
and start to think about how you use who you are to fuel where you can be. And then let's bring back networking, start to talk to people about it. I want to talk to people who are in environmental agencies so I can explore how they got there. Do they know anyone that might know anything about data? And by the way, they can share that conversation because I just got done with an amazing athletic career and I have a lot of stuff to share on leadership that I can pass on. So,
Mm.
long answer, but I think I just get excited about it because it's a long answer because it's also a journey, right? We're talking about a slice of
Yes.
someone's life, but that's the work, and that's the I think what's amazing about the possibilities too.
I think journey is the perfect word because it absolutely is. And the other thing I was thinking about as you were speaking was just the importance of doing a really good skills assessment and an inventory of who I
Yes,
am, have an understanding of what drives you, what motivates you, what you bring to the table, and then finding ways to be able to articulate that and being able
yes,
to make that clear. That maybe you don't know exactly. So this is who I am. I don't know exactly where I can take this, but this is kind of what it is, and that's where the benefit coach can help give that guidance. And I think coaching is just wonderful because it gives you. To be coaches to be wonderful because you have the opportunity that outside view of yourself, right? So sometimes
yes.
outside individuals have a better perspective because they can see your whole self, and that's why when someone says to me, "Hey, you'd be really good at this," I pay attention, right? Because I'm like, okay, because they can see something I
Yes.
can't. I remember once. I was at a Home Depot and I was looking for, we're fixing, I can't remember what I was fixing, and got in a conversation with the cashier. And randomly, she said, "You know what? You have a really good podcasting voice. You should get into podcasting, right?" I'm like, "Oh,
Mm,
hey, right? Like, it's, by the way, I've done 500 episodes, so thank you, right?" So, I mean, but, but,
yes.
but again, people can see that. And that's where the value of true coaching comes in from my perspective.
Yes. And So two thoughts. One is I love that you just brought that back because you also said something earlier about networking and that you might connect with someone and you learn something, you never know it's going to play out again.
Right.
I think you just gave a perfect example of it. Like one in the moment, you're like, oh, that's very nice. Like, oh, let me think about that. Here we go. Right. And maybe that was the spark that got you here, or maybe it was part of like the many strikes that created sparks that eventually caught the fire. But I think, yeah, take that in. One, appreciate what's been shared. Stay curious, because that might lead you somewhere. So thank you for offering that because I think it's like so much in what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's go
Mm-hmm.
back to your skill comment too, because we're gonna like knit everything together for folks.
Sure.
All right, I'm like leaving a job. I want to go to a new job. I'm thinking about a promotion, fill in the blank. To your point, how do I start with the skill sets? Listen, two paths for you to use AI. You can use a generative AI tool like a Chat GPT and say, hey, Chat GPT, can you act as my career coach? These are the things I've been doing. What skill sets do you think I could pull on to like apply for next steps? Like, what else should I be curious about? That's a generative AI example. Or and again, in both cases, I always give the caveat of make sure you do your research on how people are using your data.
Mm-hmm.
But there are also AI coaching tools out there, those that do help actually pull out skills and do prompts, like to your point around how do you explore like what's possible, where have you been? Now, I'm also not putting in this like official plug that like in-person coaching is not valuable. I think this is just an example of
Yep.
where can I use the tools to get started? How do I start to get insight? To be able to move forward. But I'm just again, we're talking about careers, networking, curiosity, possibilities, future of work, AI. All of this starts to like fold into one, but also it
Absolutely.
starts to maybe give some examples of where can I be curious about the tools to be able to move myself forward and gain insight where I may not already have.
I'm going to bring it back and lump everything into it because you talked about
Good.
humanity off the bat, and I'm going to say that the AI tools you can use as a starting point, but a live
Yes,
coach will introduce the humanitarian piece into this, right, and be able to see you as a whole person with empathy, with compassion, with understanding, which you're not going to get from AI tools. So I think it all works hand in
exactly.
hand together.
Exactly. It doesn't have the empathy. It doesn't have all the parts and pieces that are you. I love what you said. It gets you started. It's like you use this term. It's like a companion or
Sure.
what was like agent, etc. It is like think of it as like having like a little friend aside of you, but that's not the whole picture.
Correct.
Or everything that gets us, to, as you're saying, like our humanness. And so where do we go from there? We start humanizing, we connect, we learn from others, we explore with others. So yeah, it's about acceleration and perspective, but we got to fill in the rest with the journey of what is around us in this magical world of ours.
Several years ago, I wrote. I've always been a big fan of quotes, and I wrote a quote book called "Gifts from Others." And the idea, the concept
Mm,
was around is like I paid attention to what people said to me and things that resonated with me, and I turned those into quotes. I put them in but it was all
love that.
based. It was all based on the concept of what was given to me from other people. That was the gift, and so the gift of humanity is a wonderful, wonderful thing because of all the things we're able to see in other individuals and recognize them as a whole person through eyes of
Mm.
empathy and compassion and understanding. And so, again, again, a plug for those who are concerned about where AI is going to take away our humanness. I'm here to say, and I'm going to assume that you agree with me that that's not going to happen because of those elements are so key in our existence.
100%. I'm gonna use, first of all, I love that concept, that you did that, and it might be something that I'll take away. And I think that you said it like the gift, and I think the gift is wrapped, um, with love and care and empathy and understanding of something of which that AI piece is never going to give us.
Gotcha.
And so I think yeah, keep being our authentic selves in this. And I think hold to that. Hold to your gifts. Maybe this. I'm like I just love this gift thing.
Yeah.
Hold to your gifts because that's what's going to continue to propel you and that gift is what makes you special. It's what you have to offer as you're moving in your career. It's what you have to offer when you're not working with people. It's what you have to offer to yourself when you are reflecting and kind of celebrating where you're at. Yes, take and accept those gifts, and that's what's going to keep you unique and keep you human and keep us all. human in this.
I'm going to stay on brand here and throw the word audacious gifts, right? Just so we keep it, that we know that,
Yeah.
that it is part of the conversation. If listeners could sort of, implement one thing in all that we've talked about thus far and go, hey, I'm going to do this week and launch, whether it's searching for, that on that career path, or you're networking, or you're thinking about your next steps, or you're an athlete coming out of sports, you're going to figure out where to go next. What would that one thing be from your perspective?
I think with your curiosity, take that one question and do something with it. So if that's, I want to learn something from someone, go have that conversation. I'm curious about AI, go check out a tool, go check out a resource. I want to learn a new skill, go explore where a learning program where you can go do, get that from. But pull on one thing that you're curious about. Love
Beautiful.
that.
Beautiful. I didn't expect to get in a conversation about curiosity, but I'm very glad that I did. And I think there's so much wonderful things about that can you again, the possibilities and the way it opens up doors in ways you never ever thought imagine. I think so one of the things when I started this, when I knew I wanted to do a podcast, I really started thinking about what is it that mattered to me, what was important to me, and I kind of looked back and said, okay, I looked at all sort of my the wins and the significant things I had done in my life, and that the spirit of audacity existed throughout it all. And for me, audacity, curiosity is a big part of that, right? It's like, okay, what is this? Let's go find out. And so that's kind of where that's a huge vein that I believe. That's why I'm a big fan of that, and glad that we had this conversation.
Me too.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, me too. I'm just agreeing with you. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, for sure. Carlee, I've really enjoyed this chat and dialogue. It's been wonderful. For listeners that wanted to connect with you and learn more about your work, where could we send them?
Sure. They can find me on LinkedIn, and happy to connect. We also talked about a couple of things like USA Volleyball and Kennedy Krieger. Those are open sites. Always encourage people to explore. It's important. Be curious about this, which is our communities and adaptive sports and how we can be more inclusive in that space. So also encourage people to check those things out. But yep, on LinkedIn, and happy to engage.
For sure. One last thing I ask all my guests, just I get their take before we go here. What does audacious living mean to you?
Ooh, good one. I think it's exploring. It's taking that bold step and moving forward with it. It's taking that little question of can I do, and taking one step at a time into like, yes, I can. So that to me is audacious living. That's something that I've taken on my whole life, career opportunities, life moves, all of the above. So say yes, take the first step. To me, that's audacious living.
I love it. Carlee, this has been fantastic. I thank you for the time. I appreciate the conversation and the insights. And again, thanks for being a guest on the Audacious Living Podcast.
Thank you so much.
Back, we're here on the podcast. Welcome back. That conversation with Carlee really stuck with me. We spent a lot of time talking about curiosity, but if I were to think about the biggest insight for me around curiosity is that it isn't passive. It's active participation in your own growth. Carlee reminded us that staying curious doesn't mean having all the answers. It means being willing to ask better questions. Questions like, what school skills do I already have that I'm overlooking? Where do my interests naturally overlap? Or how can I use AI without losing humanity? And who can I learn from, not just network with? What I personally loved about this conversation was how grounded it felt. We didn't just talk about AI as something to fear. We talked about it as a tool. We didn't talk about networking as a transactional. We talked about it as community building. And we didn't just talk about careers as linear paths, but as evolving journeys shaped by curiosity, connection, and courage. That's audacious living to me. It's not about chasing every trend. It's about staying open, staying human, and staying willing to explore what's possible. If today's conversation resonated with you, I strongly encourage you to connect with Carlee directly. You'll find her on LinkedIn on her profile. She's her LinkedIn profile there, and she's very active. We got links in the show note to her profile to connect with her. She's very active and loves to share insights on not only just things we talked about today, but adaptive sports and inclusive community initiatives. There again, she lots of insights to offer, and she truly was a delight to speak with. So Carlee, thank you again for being here and making the time. Now, remember, life doesn't stop at that intersection we talked about at the very beginning, but curiosity helps us choose a direction with confidence. And when you combine curiosity with human connection, learning, and audacity, you don't just move forward, you move intentionally. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please take a moment to support the show. Simply all you got to do, like, follow, subscribe, and share. And obviously share it with someone who needs this message, who you think really would benefit from some of the insights that we share on this podcast. And if you're feeling generous, hey, and you like to spread that goodwill, please leave a review. It helps this podcast grow and reach even more people who are ready to live audaciously. Simply do that at ratethispodcast.com/audacious. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for staying curious, and thank you for choosing to live your life audaciously.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion. My words got power, my thoughts have action. Motivation, stay gracious. That's greatness. Be